Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but it's there only because it starts with an A. The second, valley, the hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slaves, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. My name is Monique Sample, and I'm going to be your host and moderator today as we take a deep dive into exploring the effects of colorism, how it impacts us emotionally, socially, and relationally. Our theme at FFC this month is love, and today we're promoting the idea and practice of loving the skin that you're in as we process ways to eradicate colorism, starting in our community first. This morning, we are joined by educator Portia Lawrence,
Hello.
Administrative Specialist Beverly
Hello.
Winter. I'm sorry, I almost forgot your last name. Lord. I'm so used to calling you Elder Beverly, so it's a little out of order.
Okay.
And then Training Specialist Latoya Blizzard.
Hi.
Before we engage our panelists, we first like to give a brief overview and history of social construct that is known as colorism. So the term colorism was first coined by Alice Walker in 1982 and is defined as discrimination or preferential treatment of an individual on the basis of the tone of his or her skin. So there are a couple other terminology that we're going to talk through. Discrimination based on skin color, also known as shadeism. And then there's the practice of discrimination by which those who are lighter are treated more preferably than those who have a darker skin. Okay. While the term colorism was coined in 1982, the practice of discrimination started during slavery. What you heard earlier that I read was an excerpt from what is known as the Beverly Lynch Letter. It is said to have been written in 1712, and as you can see, its impacts are still felt today in 2021. During slavery, lighter skinned people were often the result of slaves or those who were enslaved being raped by their masters. These biracial or light-skinned enslaved individuals were often given preferential treatment, such as being tasked with more domestic duties in the household versus being in the field as their darker-skinned counterparts were. This soon promoted ideas such as dark-skinned people were more suited for hard labor, and lighter-skinned people were more suited for intelligent or domestic tasks. This produced a divide and envy among Black people that has carried on today, much like the intent of the tactics shared in the Beverly Lynch Letter. So the main question of the hour is, how do we counter this as the body of Christ? Meaning, what can we do individually and collectively to promote healing and further bring colorism to an end? That's kind of our topic and our discussion for today. But before we even address that question, let's start here. How has colorism shown up in your individual lives? You want to start?
So my earliest memory, I believe I was about 8 or 9, and I was riding a car with a family member, and so I was really big into hair growing up. and I was looking at Hype magazine, the Hype Hair magazine.
Yep.
And the person in the car with me, you know, to be in those type of magazines, to be, like he said, to be in those kind of magazines, you have to be pretty. And if you get any darker than you are now, there's nobody that's gonna think you're pretty. There's no boy that's no boy will like you, and you just won't be pretty enough to be in a magazine. Because boys only like the complexion of my mother and lighter, and you barely make it. And I remember just sitting there and thinking, I can't play outside now. And I love to play outside growing up as a kid. So from like 8 or 9 until high school, I did not want to get any darker. And I was terrified because as a child, you want to be liked, you want to be received. And that person was someone that I trusted and loved. So I'm like, of course they're telling the truth, because that person was older. And I believed them. And I just really thought that to be considered pretty, I cannot get any darker than what I am, and I have to be a lighter complexion. So that's where it began for me.
Wow. That's tough to have to combat that as a child. Did you see it come up in any of your relationships with your friends because of that?
So I would say I still played outside, of course, but I put on my sunscreen. My mom would never even have to ask me, but it wasn't like an envy, but it was more so I wondered, like, how did they feel? And it was something that I never expressed until I got older. But as a child, I would always wonder, like, does she wonder about getting dark too? Does she have the same fear? Talk about my lighter skinned friends. Does she have the same fear of getting dark?
Right.
Because more so like it was fear for me.
Yeah.
But I never really had an envy of my lighter friends. It was more so like, are they scared too of this thing? Okay. And I just never, I don't know why I never asked, but I never asked them. But I just, in my head, I always wondered, were they scared too?
Interesting. Latoya, what about you? How has colorism shown up in your life?
Well, so as well, when I was younger, just from growing up, I would have older family members tell me how pretty I was. And, you know, look at your skin, it's so light and pretty, and you've got this long, pretty hair. And so for me, I felt like it set this standard. And I always felt like, oh, well, I have to keep my hair a certain way, like I have to keep this look. And even as I got older, I would always hear, like, you know, you're pretty because, you know, of your skin. Like, that's what makes you pretty. And I would see other people and, you know, even being in school, and I would see girls, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, well, she is pretty, but she's
not
lighter
the same
than
skin
me.
tone.
You know,
Yeah.
She's lighter than me, or maybe she's darker than me, but she's pretty. Like, why am I the standard? Why does my skin tone have to be the standard of pretty? And that really just, it felt like a weight. Like, you know, I have to be the standard. Like, why? And I did feel that I was treated a bit differently. My darker skinned cousins, like, they would always talk about me, like they would make fun of me, and like, you know, who is your dad? You know, is your dad white? You know, because I was lighter than they were.
Wow.
And I had another family member that really, she was older and was questioning, did I belong in the family? And that, you know, as I think I maybe was 10 or 11, but that's a lot to take in as a 10-year-old, and somebody questioning who you are because you don't look like them.
Right.
You don't look like you belong with us.
Right.
And so that stuck with me for a while. Like, even as I was growing up and, you know, going through esteem issues because, you know, my family feels like I don't belong because I don't look like them.
Right.
And that's just not fair at all.
When do you feel like it shifted for you?
I don't know for sure when, but At some point, it did, and I think it had a lot to do with even who I put myself around, and just starting to recognize that just because they're family, they may not have your best interests at heart. And
That's good. That's good.
it's unfortunate to think that way, but that's just what it is. Like, the things that they said to me were hurtful.
Right.
And just because they are labeled as family, like, that doesn't make it okay for them to hurt me.
Absolutely not. Have you ever addressed it with them?
No.
Okay. Elder Beverly, what about you? How has colorism shown up in your life?
I would say it was in elementary school, where I noticed the teacher, it was probably about 2 teachers between elementary and high school, that would teach that would treat the kids, with long hair, light color skin. That was what we consider the teacher's pet. It didn't matter how smart you are, and that was my dilemma. The smart person is raising their hand to answer, but you're calling on this one. Or so-and-so would talk out of line, and you'd say, well, you just stop it. And the other person is like, well, now you're not supposed to. So that's where the division for me came in. So it didn't really affect me that much because there was a lot of people in my class that looked like me. So we just kind of stuck together. Whether they were smart or not smart, we were the same color. We enjoyed each other's company. And, we went through elementary school and high school that way. And like Latoya was saying, there were some girls, tall, light-skinned, and some of them used it to their advantage, and some of them really didn't care. So I stuck with those that really didn't care, and they became my friends.
Do you feel like it has shown up in other ways outside of just what you experienced in school? Do you think it came up in any of your interactions with your own family members or in the workplace?
With my family members growing up, I had a cousin that looked like Latoya. And she tried her best to be the opposite, and I couldn't understand why. But now I understand why.
Yeah.
Because she didn't want to feel like she was different. So, she was always the one out in the sun, and I'm like, goodness gracious, when we were told, stay out of the sun,
Right.
like, Portia was saying. So that's where in the family I saw it. And at work, yeah. Not so much presently, but going up in my 20s and 30s, I could see the pretty girls, would get their way. I was in the military for a while. You would think that would be different, but it's not, because they're just people.
Right.
And you bring your issues with you, wherever you go.
Yeah.
So you just try to stay focused, know who you are, love yourself, and that's the way I chose to take that path.
That's definitely some good wisdom to share. Why do you all feel like colorism is so widespread and happens in all of our lives, but is so seldom talked about? I mean, we're sitting here having this conversation, but I can't remember the last time I heard a church having this conversation. So why do you think that it's something that is so seldom talked about? Latoya, let's start with you.
Well, I think first, again, and going back to hearing these things from your family, you feel like it's okay. It's not an issue. Like, it's okay, because they said it, because grandparents said it or my favorite aunt said it, so it's okay. We don't recognize the damage that it's doing. As well, we don't want to admit that it's really a thing. We as a race are combating racism from others, so we don't want to feel like we're also internally fighting, even though we really are.
Right.
And it's difficult to have that moment of self-reflection, like this is what I'm doing, or this is what's even been done to me, and address it and deal with it and correct it.
Yeah. What about you, Portia? What are your thoughts?
I agree totally. And what I was thinking while you were talking, Latoya, brokenness, and that's like the word that just popped in my head, because like we're all, you know, on a journey, but there's just goodness. Different when you are still in that broken spot, and so many people never leave that same spot that I was in at 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
You kind of this is your existence. This is how you feel. Like you feel like this shade is just not right, and you just go your entire life feeling like that. So how can you talk about something that is so a part of you that it's hidden?
Right.
And it's, you know, it's kind of hard to say that, but it's like it's plain sight, but it's hidden at the same time. So I feel like it's hard to speak about something. And also, the other part of it is power. So the flip side of colorism that, you know, isn't talked about a lot is how darker skinned people put off, for something like for Latoya, I would say, oh, you're not black enough. Or you can't be down with us.
Yeah.
So then I've shifted the power to me. And when you create that othering, it makes you feel like you're now powerful. Now you can call the shots of who's pretty and who's not.
Right.
So now why would you talk about a system that now has worked for you? And I feel like that is something that happens all the time that we don't talk about, that is just as disgusting as what I felt as a little girl of being too dark.
Right, absolutely.
And so to talk about both, like to talk about the reverse colorism that we do, you have to address your current brokenness and then this crazy power structure that you've just started.
Right.
And who wants to do that?
Right. And I think what you spoke about definitely speaks to the history of where colorism started. So we talked about the Willie Lynch letter, and he specifically wanted to pin each other against blacks against blacks.
Yep.
You know, oh, you're too dark and you can't do what I can do. You're not smart enough because you're darker, which is, it's incredibly crazy to think about, but it's a mental shift. And it's a constant repeating of that information over and over and over again, and then you start to believe it.
Yeah.
It definitely becomes your identity.
Right.
Which again, it makes it hard to shed your identity when you start to deal with these things.
Right.
Because this is who I am. This even though it's hurtful, even though it's traumatic, this is still who I am. And I've learned to live in this, and I'm comfortable here.
Right.
And so this conversation that we're having, somebody is uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because somebody has said something, or somebody has done something, or they are that person, and that's uncomfortable, and I don't want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Nope.
And that's where I see it. Some people just don't know because it's what they're used to. You know, that's just the way it is, and sometimes by the time you realize that that's not the way it is, you're too ashamed to go back and say, you know what, I am sorry. I should have known better when I said that to you. And I'm sorry for saying that.
Yeah.
You know, they don't realize, oh, she grew up, she'll be all right.
Yeah.
Not
Absolutely.
realizing she's not all right and she's never been all right.
Right.
So now we know, or that they will know, okay, we need to stop the madness because this is hurting people's feelings and changing the way they feel about themselves. If I didn't like it done to me, why would I do it to somebody else?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's the concept, if you know better, you do better, you know? And it comes back to, that's one of the places where we invoke healing, you know, especially around trauma. You know, when we've all experienced in some way, shape, or capacity this trauma of feeling like we're other, or we don't belong, you know. I think about Sesame Street, and when I was a kid, one of the things that they talked about constantly is, one of these things is not like the other, one of these things just doesn't belong. And yes, that's great. We think, oh, my election. Someone will say, well, that person doesn't belong because they don't look like the others, and to say why I feel like there's an impact as strong as it is in America. Elder Beverly, I'll
I
start with
can
you.
say yes, because when I went to school, there were these two Indian girls. One was older, one was younger. And I didn't know I knew the lighter looking one was Indian, but the one that looked like Portia, I'm like, she couldn't be Indian, because I never saw any pictures of any Indians that looked like you. But she had straight jet black hair, and her demeanor was so much different than her sister's, who was lighter skinned. Even though her hair was shorter, she had a more confident attitude than her younger sister, who was that much darker than her.
Right.
So I've seen in other cultures, and not just Indians, but that one specifically stood out to me right now. But I'm sure it's in other cultures. It's a power thing,
Yeah.
or just whatever I can do to fit in to get the edge over you. It's okay for me to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I think going back to that feeling of belonging, like you've got to be Christian, you've got to be mixed, you've got to be everything but who you are.
Right.
And it's like, no, but at some points in my life, I was like, well, let me trace back. Like, yes, I'm half white, sure.
Yep.
And I'm like making up this identity, and it's just like, when I look at myself in the mirror, it's like, that's not, but you're not.
Right.
You're not.
Yeah.
You're black. You're black. And at the end of the day, when other races see me, they see me as a black woman or the black girl, So I really had to figure out, like, I do belong. Like, I am who I am, and it's, and it's okay.
Right.
It's
You're
okay.
you're exactly as God designed you and created you to be.
Absolutely.
And so unfortunately you have to hush those naysayers or those people who think anything other than that you're a child of God, and you're beautiful in the skin that you're in.
Yep.
I think about, so when we talk about colorism, a lot of it bleeds into some of our conversations about American beauty standards. And at one point, the standard for American beauty was white women. And I still feel like some of that is today as well, but I feel like there's more of a conscious effort to showcase black women. But do you feel like American beauty standards still reflect sort of this whiteness or this white supremacy sort of air or attitude?
Yes, I do. Because, you see it in the media. That's, it's a commercial and they'll show the black person, but I'm like, she looks almost as white as that white person. Or sometimes it's just the one token black person. I'm like, couldn't they put 2 out of the 5?
Yeah.
So you see it, they're trying, but are they trying just to meet the rules, or are they trying because their heart has changed? That's the issue that I don't know.
I understand that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So for me growing up, when like Disney Channel, you would have that one black girl, but then it's kind of like, is she black or is she not black? It's like it's kind of confusing.
Right.
But now when I'm watching it with Cleo, my niece, I see more diversity, but it's still like sprinkles.
Right.
And that's where it starts on Disney Channel. Then, commercials, like who are you putting in the commercial? Like it's better, there's more diversity, but it's still not the full range of beauty. Like there's just so much beauty. If you just think about just our community, there's just so many forms of beautifulness. Is that a word? I don't know. For black women, especially for black women, it's just like we're like art. We definitely are art.
Absolutely.
And I don't see that consistently in the media as I wish I could see. And I'm a teacher, so books that I choose, I try to be I tried to be strategic with the books, but there's not a huge selection of showing beautiful little black boys in different shades, beautiful little black girls. And it's better, but we have such a far way to go for my son and my niece to see that their beauty is still beautiful no matter
what shade they are.
Yeah.
The big curls and like I don't have that because I've spent so many years straightening my hair that my hair is trained to just be that way. And so because years ago when I was growing up, like that's what pretty was. That's what that's what the definition of being pretty. And for me, being the light-skinned girl with the good hair or the good long hair, like this is what you do to your hair. Like don't you dare walk around, with your hair like this. Like, this is how you have to look. So again, for me, it was like this standard that I always felt like I had to meet because I looked, I have to look the part. I have to be this because, you're light skinned, so your hair has to be straight and long. Like, what?
Yeah.
And that gets tiresome, but again, as a child, you don't know any better. And so you just keep going back and you keep going back, and no matter what the damage is, and, in my case,
bleeds in all facets of our lives. How do you feel like your connection with your children has shifted because of your experiences?
Well, I teach my children that they are beautiful, that they are fearfully and wonderfully made. My daughter especially, she has said sometimes that, like she's so dark and the complexion of your skin is yet a minor detail of the greatness of you. And that's what I want them to remember as they grow up and to teach their children.
That's good. Portia or Elder Beverly?
I have a daughter who looks like Latoya. Her father looks like Latoya. So, that was just the card she was dealt. But I've always told her she's beautiful. She has a lot of self-confidence. But at the same time, she has seen how people have treated her compared to other people. The same thing with the good hair, the bad hair. I'm like, no, you have healthy hair.
Right.
Because we take care of it, You could have straight hair and it looks fried. That's not good hair. So, and I'm like, well, your mindset, your skin tone, my philosophy is your skin tone does not determine your intellect or your character. So, bad people come skin tones, all cultures. Good people come in all skin tones and all cultures. So that's kind of what I try to instill in her, that she is beautiful, who she is, and don't let anybody, judge you just because of the way you look. You determine your own self-worth. So that's something I've instilled, up until this day.
I'm definitely taking notes from you.
Is young, so
I'm
this
just
is
2.5
great.
years in this, but one thing that I do with him, and since birth with him, is I am very intentional and specific of him. So I'll tell him, okay, you're a good boy because boom, or I really like the way you did boom, or man, you were so funny because you did da da da.
My daughter loves your little boy. She's like, oh, that little one. Oh yeah, I could just eat his face.
He's so adorable.
That makes me so happy.
Oh my goodness.
So I try to do that. That makes me sad. Thank you.
Yeah,
Give her a big hug for me. But that's what I try to do with him. Kind of that helped me a lot with my parents. Helped that shift from it's a very great thing.
Right.
But they were very intentional about the compliments they gave us. So I got to learn what I like specifically about myself. So I'm trying to now give Hendrix that same thing. This is, you know, he's going to learn what he likes, you know, later. But right now, this is what mommy thinks is awesome about you. And what I do with people, I'm starting to do this now, not so much now with COVID, but before, when they do make comments about his skin or about his hair, and I think it's something crazy, I'm right there to kind of shift it. And I'm not nasty with him, like, oh, you know, like he'll say, oh, he got that good hair. He has nice, healthy hair.
Right.
You know, I'll say so he can hear me.
It, yeah.
And I think that was the one thing that I wish I would have received growing up. Parents are great, but I wish I would have received this kind of that comeback. Like when an older family member would say this about my skin or my hair or this, I wish there was another voice to kind of shift it
Right.
in the moment, because that would have been powerful.
Yeah. Or even a follow-up conversation to combat kind of what you've heard and, you know, shift your mindset so that you can then say, okay, I'm hearing this from my mom or my dad or someone else that I revere. And so now that I've heard it from them, I know what the truth is, you know, and because you see them more on a daily basis, that holds more water and more weight to it than what someone else may have said. You know, so I think that's good. So I think we've had a great conversation during our time, but let's go to the big topic that, you know, the big question that we had at the very beginning. You know, what can we do in the body of Christ to counter this culture of colorism and to aid in the eradication of that concept?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like the biggest thing with any tough topic or anything just with shame, you have to talk about it, because shame, anything that's negative only can fester in the dark. It can only grow in the dark. And we
the only way that we can truly get rid of this is that we've got to start to train our children. So, you know, talking to Hendrix, who's 2, and talking to Corey, who's 15, like, you know, she's the wave that's coming in, and she's going to be comfortable enough to speak out when she hears someone that is being negative or talking down about her complexion or her hair. She can speak up and be bold enough to say, no, I am beautiful just the way I am.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like it, I am,
Right.
you know. And so that, and we need to encourage that. We need to encourage people to speak when they have been hurt, when someone has said something about them that is just not true. God did not create any ugly being.
Right.
He just didn't. And so who are you to tell me or anybody else that they are ugly?
Absolutely.
Who are you?
Right. Absolutely.
And so, you know, so we just
Yeah. Who are you? Yeah.
Who are you? Really?
No, you'd say. Can't do. And the younger yourself first, you know, much, and as you know, relationships, and you know, we do a great job of that here, you know, reaching out to people,
Right.
you know, complimenting them, even if you don't know them. That's a beautiful dress. You know, they may have been having a rotten day for whatever.
Right. Yeah.
That's a beautiful dress.
Yeah.
You know, and mean it and keep smiling.
So we should be healing one another by
Right.
having these conversations, and understanding that this is the first step to making it better.
Yeah.
So I can't change what was said to you at 8 in the car while
Right.
you were reading the magazine. But what I can do is create a space for you to talk about it and heal from it, and then we can learn and do better.
Absolutely.
So I think that that's really what we have to keep in mind as a church unit, as a body of Christ. Like this is one of those healing points
Right.
that we are obligated to do, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
I think you guys touched on so many great points and all of the things I would think that we need to be doing as a body of Christ. And as we go out into the world, how do we take what we're learning here and share that with others so that others start to see themselves as God sees them, you know, and God sees all of us as being beautiful and our own authentic, real selves, like he you know, raw. I made you that way and I know who you are and that's who I love, and we need to see more of ourselves as God sees us. And I think you all hit the nail on the head about so many different things. It starts with this conversation. And so I want to thank you all for joining me today, and this has been a great time, and I really do appreciate you all opening up and showing yourselves.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you
It's
for
great.
having me.
Thank you.
Yes.